Okay, and welcome back. Okay, so we've managed to set up our IDE to create our applications that can target Flash Player 11 using Away3D and Molehill. Okay, it's a very simple application so far. So now we're going to jump into some bit of 3D software and start manipulating some meshes that we can export and import into our Away3D scene. So here I am in a Blender 3D, and as you can see, I've got a nice model on my screen, which we're going to be just exporting little bits from and then bringing it into our scene. This model you've already seen little glimpses of. This is going to be our final piece. This is the final the target of this particular tutorial is to create this. So as you can see, it's a model that was downloaded from a website called blendswap.org, which is a model repository for Blender models. Recently, the Blender team got together a group of very talented animators, and they created an open project which the team was called Durian, and the actual film was called Sintel, and it was an excellent piece of animation that they created, used some very, very high quality models, and of course, as it's an open source software, they've released some of the models out to the general public. So this one was, like I said, was downloaded from blendswap.org. I'm sure that if you actually buy the DVD from blender.org, that you will actually have loads of the working models available for you to use on the actual DVD. But as it is at the moment, this is the one that I downloaded, and as you can see, it's 31,000 or 31,500 polygons, and it runs really, really well in the Flash Player. So you can see running sort of like going between sort of 20 and 30 frames per second, and I've only got it set at 24 frames per second. I'm sure if I had it set at 60, it would run even smoother. So here we are in Blender. And it's really simple. This particular model, in its raw state, had lots of modifiers and had an armature or a few armatures and some lattices and stuff like that, which I've actually deleted to try and simplify the model. I don't really need any of the armature stuff. I'm not going to animate this model. I'm just using it in this simple pose, which is kind of in a Vitruvian Man pose without the open legs, but it's all I really need in order to be able to get this to display nicely in the Flash Player. So I'm going to do some really, really simple stuff in here. We're going to click on the body. As you can see, in Blender, as in most applications, you would click the left mouse in order to grab something. In Blender, you click on the right button of the mouse. You click on G to grab it, and then you can move the object around. And then click the right key to let go of it. But all we need to do is select items, and then all we're going to do is File, Export, and export to a wavefront.obj file. Now, I just want to point out that this particular build that I'm using is 2.56. B. The latest version that's available at the time of recording this tutorial is 2.57, but I've noticed that in the exporter for OBJ files, the option to copy images isn't available in the latest build. So I'm using a slightly older build, but the wonder of Blender is that you can download the zip file, run it. You don't need to install it on your computer. You can actually run the whole application from the zip file, and it runs beautifully. Just 27 megabytes, and you've got this amazing piece of 3D software. So what we're going to do here is I've created a folder called Meshes within my project folder. We're going to choose selection only, and we're going to copy images. And I'm just going to do body.obj. Okay, we're going to export. Okay, so if we now go back into FDT, now we can see here straight away that it's exported a body OBJ file, a body.mtl file, and the skin texture that's used as part of that body. Now, the .mtl file we're not going to be using. As it stands at the moment, Away3D doesn't pass the .mtl file and then build any materials or textures based on what's in that file. That's what the MTL file would normally do, but as it is at the moment, that file is pretty much pointless, and it's something that we're not going to need to use. I don't know if in a future version of Away 3D they're going to build in a parser that can parse these files and display the models appropriately. I know that it's something that's available in Unity 3D, which at the moment doesn't export to Flash, but I know that it will in a future release. With something like Unity 3D, where you can just take your model out of Blender, plonk it straight into Unity 3D, and then all your textures and your models, your animations and your armatures, and absolutely everything is available for you to use straight in Unity 3D, which of course in future you'll be able to just export straight into your Flash application. But as it stands at the moment, because we're using Away 3D, that's not available, so we're going to have to add these textures programmatically once we've exported or imported the OBJ files into our application. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go through this model, and we're just going to skip the eyes. What I've got there, that's not what I want. The eyes. Okay, cool. So let's go File. We're just going to export all of these OBJ files. Just eyes, OBJ, selection only, and then copy images. I'm just going to export that, and then we're going to go for the vest. We're just going to go through it. There's not much here to export, it's only a few little bits, and it doesn't take long. We're going to do vest, OBJ, and we're going to do selection only. Remember, it's selection only, and copy images, and then export. And we're going to do the gloves, file, export, in front, meshes from the gloves, .obj. Copy images, selection only. Let's export it. We've just got to do our trousers, file, export, OBJ. Go into here, trousers, OBJ, and selection only, and then copy images, export, and last of all, boots, file, export, OBJ, meshes, boots, OBJ. Selection only, copy images. Okay, so let's go in here. Let's just delete any of these .html files. So you can see we've got all of our meshes that we need here. Let's just double check we've got everything that we need. So we've got body's done. So we've got the gloves, vest, body, eyes, trousers, boots. The only thing we're not able to export here is the actual hair. As you can see, there's a hair object in Blender that actually is a particle system, which isn't supported yet in Away 3D. You can convert this to a mesh. I have tried to convert it to a mesh and get it to render in the 3D scene in Molehill application. As of yet, it doesn't display very well, so it's not something that I'm going to do for this particular tutorial. But I'm sure it's something that other people are working on. If you're going to be building like a game or something, you're not really going to want to build in lots of hair, which of course is essentially a hell of a lot of points. This particular mesh here that I've got, as you can see, it's 19,764 vertices, which is a hell of a lot of points. But as it is at the moment, we're not going to be using that. So we've got everything we need here in our meshes folder. And so now let's get in and import this into our Away 3D application. So what we don't need any of this. We're going to be adding our meshes in here. And then what we also need to do, let's create a container for our mesh. Object container 3D. And then our box isn't going to exist anymore, so let's just a container and let's get rid of our box up here, which we don't need. Okay, so we've created our container. Let's now create something we're going to call a mesh manager. Equals new mesh manager. Okay, let's create a class. Let's call it com.active model.managers. We don't need a superclass, so So I'm just going to call it Mesh Manager. Right, now the reason we're doing a Mesh Manager is because the way Away 3D stands at the moment is it uses something called a resource manager in order to be able to load in and pass any 3D files that it's loaded into the application. The resource manager at the moment is a singleton class, so you can only ever have one of them active at any one time, and the particular functions are done via static functions. So only one object can be loaded in at a time, then it fires a resource retrieved event, and then you can load in the next object and so on. And so there's nothing at the moment that handles any of that loaded in. So we're just going to create a very simple class which we're going to call Mesh Manager, and we're going to use that to pull in the information that we need. Then what we're going to do here is we're going to create an array, we're going to call meshes equals, and that's going to be an array. And this is going to have an array of we're going to have a URL as to where the mesh is. So we're going to have this particular meshes /body.obj. Okay, and then we're also going to have a material, and then we're going to add our material to that particular class, and what that's going to be done via using the bitmaps that we've already got available, which we'll do in a minute. So let's go into our Mesh Manager, and the first function we're going to do is we're going to call a function called getMeshes. Just create this function, and into that we need to pass our meshes, which is an array, and then we're going to create a callback function. Which is going to be fired once all of the meshes have been retrieved to tell our main class file when it's ready to move on to its next function, which is going to be the callback function. So first of all, let's create our meshes. This mesh, and our callback function. We're going to, and our callback function. Okay. So we've got our meshes, and let's go to load meshes. Okay, let's create our meshes function. And now when we're loading our meshes, the first thing that we need to do, this is going to load the mesh actually, because it's only going to be loading in one mesh at a time. And the first thing we need to do is actually add an event listener to our resource manager. So we've got our resource manager. And because it's singleton, we've got our instance, and we're going to add an event listener. So this is going to be a resource event dot resource retrieved event, and we're going to do on the resource retrieved, and that's our function we're going to create there. And then what we're also going to do is we're going to have a container. Between that, we're going to tell the object container 3D equals new object container 3D. Actually, it's not a new one. It's actually resource manager dot instance dot get resource. I know the URL, of course, we're passing into our meshes array particular URLs as to where the OBJ files are. So we're going to do meshes, and we're going to create a variable called index dot URL. So let's create our variables. Tidy this up and create our variable called index, and that's actually going to be a uindex, an unsigned integer. For those of you that are wondering, I'm using FDT. It's got something on it that's called Quick Fix, which is an absolutely brilliant function. On a Windows PC, which I'm using, you just press Control-1 whenever something's highlighted, and it suggests a way to fix that particular error. So if you're creating a variable, so if I create a simple variable called just boxes equals new sprite, it's going to tell me that sprite isn't actually available at the moment. So if I do Control-Shift-O, and it imports flash.display.sprite, and if I do Control 1, it will highlight to tell me that the red highlighted area box isn't available, but I can create it by clicking it. So if I click it straight away, it creates private var boxes. So that's what I'm doing. Whenever you see suddenly the variables being created magically, that's exactly what I'm doing. I just do Control 1 and then just selecting that particular option. And it's something beautiful that FDDT does above all other ActionScript IDEs, although I understand that IntelliJ IDEA 9 is pretty good, but hey, this isn't a discussion about IDEs, it's about Away3D. So we're now going to create a current container, which is going to tell this manager which container is being loaded in at the time. Oops. There we go. So we need to create our current container. That's an object container 3D. So let's go in now and sort out our onResourceRetrieved function. So let's go and we're going to first of all remove this event now. We don't want it to mess things up. And now, if you go to the Away3D examples page, which is available here, and you go to this particular example here, it's available to download. Once you've downloaded it, and you've got and you've got it available. Here we go. In our Broomstick, if you go to you'll download it, you'll get examples Broomstick zip file, extract it, and you'll get all of the examples that are available on that page of the Away3D site. Go to the source, and you'll have a loader OBJ test, and that tells you exactly how to have a look at your mesh once you've managed to pass it, once you've managed to download it and load it into your application. And what we're going to need to be doing is we're going to create a for loop. Okay, Control space. I've got a template here for a for loop, and then what we're looking for is current container dot num_children. Okay, and then what we're going to do here is we're going to do var mesh equals the mesh, and that's going to be current container dot get child at, and we're just going to say I, and we're going to say mesh dot geometry dot scale. No, I'm just going to put on there for the moment, and I'm just going to show you the model that we had in Blender. If you actually manage to have a look at it, the scale of it is actually very small compared to the actual world that it's sitting in. So in order to get that to display nicely within our application, I've actually had to scale that up by an amount of 500. I've just noticed as well that our get meshes function actually needs to be public. And then what we're going to do then is we're going to create our function called assign material. I'm going to give that a mesh. And then to our parent, we're going to create a parent container. So let's do parent container equals new object container 3D. And then we're going to add this mesh to our parent container. And so what we're going to do here is once we've added all of our meshes in place and everything's been loaded in, we're going to fire our callback function and pass that parent container back to this particular class and tell it to display it. So now we're going to assign our material. We're going to say mesh.material equals meshes, and we're using the index variable and dot material. And then what we're going to do, it's nice and simple, we're going to increment our index. And then what we need to do is then say if the index is less than the mesh's array length, and do this. Else fire callback. Just do our fire callback function, and then all we're going to do here is fire callback. Okay, we're just going to pass in this variable, and then what we're going to do here in our main class is we're going to have our callback function. We're going to call it function, and we're going to call it all meshes loaded, and we're going to have an object. We're going to call it an object container 3D, and then we're going to say container equals object. So that's how that would fire. Just make this protected actually, just so that it doesn't highlight it in all of that. So there we are. Okay, so if we actually want to add that to our view.scene add child container. Okay, so let's go in. We've got this. Let's do this if index plus load a mesh, and let's have a look. Let's double check that we've got everything right here. I think that's pretty much it for this one here. Mesh is loaded. So it's pretty simple, as you can see in the constructor. Okay, we assign our meshes to this way. We've got our meshes, we've got a callback function and a parent container. We load a mesh, that loads the mesh. Once it's loaded, it then passes the geometry to have a look at the child, to look at the children, add them to the parent container. Usually there's going to be one object in there, but you never know, there could be more. It adds it to the container, assigns the material to it, and then let's do this way actually, so let's add the container first. And then if index is less than meshes.length, load the next mesh. If not, then fire the callback, which then fires the callback in our parent class, and then adds it to the stage, or to this particular stage. So now let's go in and create all of our meshes and our materials that are going to be needed to be displayed in our particular application.